you came to America when you were 2 or hardly 2. I was wondering, what was your first musical memories? Musical, you know, what music did your parents play?
My parents were very musical, both my father's family and my mother's. But my father brought my mother and I to Miami, and then he left to train for Bay of Pigs invasion. So we were alone. And when we left Cuba, they wouldn't let us take anything. So little by little, my grandmother started sending my mom's records whenever she could with someone that would come to the city. And the first records I remember, because I would sit and look at them and listen to them constantly, was Orquesta Aragon, Cachao, which is on this record. So to me, it's such a thrill to have him on. Okay. Celia Cruz, Olga Guillot, all the great Cuban musicians and singers that my mother listened to. Then after that was Johnny Mathis, that my mother fell in love with when she came to the United States, and would play him. And then when I started playing guitar at 8 years old, I would learn really old Cuban music from my old Cuban guitar teacher for my grandma, because she was my only audience, and I would sing songs from the 20s, 30s, and 40s in Cuba. So that was my very, very first influence.
Yeah, so when you were young, the American culture wasn't directly, it wasn't that you directly went to, you know, the Western pops?
The American culture really did not become a part of my life until my dad came back from Bay of Pigs after being a political prisoner for 2 years there in the exchange that Kennedy made. My father came out and he joined the Army, the American Army. So we moved to Texas. And when I went to first grade, 6 years old, I started, in school I was the only Hispanic in the class and I didn't speak English, but within 6 months I won the reading award, so I learned very, very quickly. And at that time is when I started listening to then my first song that I remember, pop song, that made my hair stand up on my arm, was Ferry Cross the Mercy by Jerry and the Pacemakers, the British invasion beginning. And only now I realize that the reason that song got me so much is because it's a bolero. It has bongos, it's got maracas, it's got the clave. So here you, and the Beatles, Till There Was You, also was a bolero. So you have these British acts, you know, getting a little bit of exotic things for them, but to me it was the most natural thing in the world. And then I started listening, and then it was Stevie Wonder, Elton John, Carole King. All the songwriters were really a big influence for me.
Yeah, okay. So there's, but really the first thing were, the Cuban music?
Cuban music was the first thing I ever learned.
Can you describe the vibe from Cuban music in a few words? What is the special thing about that?
It makes you move. I think the rhythm, because it's African in its core. Most of the Cuban rhythms that you hear, and most of the rhythms in Latin America, are very deeply influenced by African music and African rhythms. And this drums were the first communication in the world. So I really think that the reason that music, you know, can cross over is because it gets us at a very, you know, basic level, and it makes you move. You may not know the specifics of how to dance it, but it's very happy music. It makes you feel good, and it's infectious. It makes you want to shake your body somehow.
Yeah. Okay. And well, even now, where do you feel? Where's your heart musically, and personally?
My heart is all over the place. I have the great, you know, joy and privilege of having distinctly two cultures that shaped me. The very first one, my Cuban culture, very alive in me, because Cubans, since we don't have our homeland, we cling very much to those traditions and anything that smells or tastes of that longing that we have for that country that I was born in but don't really know. And of course our parents filled us with so many beautiful ideas about the Cuba that they knew. At the same time, I'm American, but I grew up in Miami, which is a totally different city in the United States. It allowed me to be really in both cultures at the same time. So it depends. I can create anywhere along that spectrum, and it truly is who I am. But the beginning, the core, obviously, is the Latin. That's very much a part of me.